I'm a program officer for the Architectural Heritage Fund, and I cover London and the southeast and east of England. And my role is to deal with our inquiries and assess applications, and then monitor the projects that we support across that part of the country. Asha, do you want to?
Yeah, and I'm Asha. I'm the investment manager for the AHF. So I work on the investment team side of what the AHF does. My remit, similar to Laura's, is taking applications from inquiry stage to kind of our credit panel, and we cover, the investment team covers the whole of the UK, and currently there's myself and 3 other colleagues working within the investment team. So we are a relatively small team working across quite a large geographical area, but yeah, we get to see great fascinating projects across the whole of the UK.
So obviously we don't have a huge amount of time, so we'll kick off. It's a big topic. It's pretty fundamental to most projects. So this is going to be a fairly sort of top level skim of options, and drawing a little bit on our experience of being a funder, but also fundraising experience as well. And then, as Hannah said, we're very happy to sort of take specific questions at the end. I was just going to start by covering some of the key things that I think is really important to kind of consider and be clear on right from the outset, because this is the kind of information that funders or potential supporters will be asking of you. So firstly, just to be clear on and understand what stage you're actually at in your project. Have you actually got a building already, or have you got an interest in one? Do you have a freehold or long leasehold, or is that something you've got a reasonable prospect of acquiring? And do you know what it is you actually want to do? So is it something that you've already tested, or do you need help kind of getting set up, looking at what the options are, like establishing what the costs are? So are you at that really early stage, or actually have you got much more of an idea and it's the development stage that you're at, doing more detailed development work? Or are you ready to start a capital project? Essentially, the stage you're at will correspond with the REBA stages, if you're familiar with those. If you're not, have a look at those, because being clear on where you are does feed into what type of funding you need as well. So if it is early stage, then it may be that you need some help with establishing feasibility. Or you might need some help actually setting up as an organization that's able to take a project forward. So it may be some kind of revenue or core funding you need related to governance or legal costs, or it may be actually getting some concept design work done, or if you are more progressed, it's actually development funding that you need, or it's capital funding, or it might be a mix, but being very clear about the type of funding that you actually need. And then, of course, what kind of funding you're eligible for, and this will come down to essentially the type of organization that you are, and what it is your project is actually going to deliver. So how are you constituted? Are you constituted or an unconstituted group, a not-for-profit, a social enterprise, a community benefit society? Different types of funding will work for different types of organisation, and will determine the kind of funding that you can access. And then what is it your project is actually going to deliver in a nutshell? Is it conservation led? Is it just getting a building back into a good state? Or are you clear on what the use will be, and will there be very clear, tangible kind of social or economic or environmental impacts from delivering it? So so what is the proposition? And also location. I mean, for us, location is important as well, and that will feed back into the type of funding you're eligible for, where this work is actually happening. So all of these things are pretty fundamental to understanding what your funding options are, the kind of the building blocks. And then obviously there's a huge range of different types of funding that can be accessed, as Hannah said, and most projects will end up with a pretty mixed funding package by accident or design, or a combination of the two, in fact. So a lot of the projects that we're supporting will involve, and we see a mix of these kind of main sources of funding. Obviously, grants is the one that everyone will be familiar with, both statutory and non-statutory. So there's obviously quite a lot of money coming from government, national and local government at the moment, the Levelling Up, Townsdeal. There's community infrastructure levy, Section 106. There's community ownership fund. There's a lot of different statutory sources out there, but obviously there's also the lottery and trusts and foundations, and many grants will be, many projects will be reliant on grant funding, but it's certainly not the only route to go down. Individual giving is an important part of a package, and that's not just wealthy philanthropists hopefully giving large sums of money. It's potentially a lot of people, a local community, chipping in a smaller amount, potentially through a crowdfunding campaign, or leaving a legacy. It's actually about mobilizing support from individuals as much as you can. Community shares relates to that in terms of getting individuals to support you. That's the type of funding that we support. I'll say a little bit more about it, and is relevant if you're a community benefit society. You can actually get that community buy-in in a more formal way. Companies, corporate support can still play an important part in supporting projects, though it can be difficult to unlock. But if your project is allied to their interests, then we still see a fair amount of corporate support for projects. Generating income, there may be something you're already doing, or there is potential to run activities that can feed into the funding of your project, a pop-up cafe, some rental income, some income from events. And then there's loan finance, and that's what Ash is going to talk about in much more detail shortly. So I mentioned that those different types of funding are something that we have involvement in. The Architectural Heritage Fund is a specialist funder for heritage building projects, has been for about 45 years. So we provide loan finance and grants and advice and support. And in particular, we provide grant funding for that kind of early stage viability and development work that's quite hard to attract funding for, because it's the high risk side of funding, before something is perhaps fully developed or a building is secured. But we have at different times been able to provide capital funding for projects as well. We support community share offers, community share schemes, and we do that in partnership with Co-ops UK, and we'll also provide match funding for crowdfunding campaigns to try and broaden that buy-in to a project as well. And loan investment is was actually where we started and is a very big part of what we do, and often we're combining loans and grants, so it's a kind of a balance, and Asha I know will touch on that. Obviously this is a real canter through, but just to kind of distill many years experience of fundraising and working with funders into kind of a few sort of headline thoughts, and they may seem like no-brainers, but we see these issues come up time and time again. The first one is to ensure that you've got the time and the skills needed to put a funding package together, because it is very difficult. It's very difficult for one person to do, and often somebody gets nominated, and I think instead, it's really important to try and consider putting together some kind of funding board or a working group, or considering whether you actually need to get in some external help from a fundraiser, and somebody's got the experience, but also gives you the capacity that you need to do this, because it's often a long haul and time consuming, which relates to the second point about planning well ahead. These projects almost always take longer than you think, and almost always cost more than you think, unfortunately. And so it's a lengthy and quite complex process to put a funding package together and kind of identify how that might be made up and come together, so that you are where you need to be and hit your targets. And research is key to this. So not just being clear on what you need and how much you need, but then using that to identify who your best prospects are. And really, valuable to talk to other people that have done similar projects and look at who's funded them, so that you can kind of build that rounded picture. Considering how you might phase or scale the project, and more and more, because it's really hard to unlock, in particular, large sums of money, we're seeing projects being broken down into more manageable chunks, so that they can be delivered over time, for smaller packages of funding, and then built up as the funds come in. And that seems a very pragmatic way to go in the funding climate that we're in, but also scaling a project. So, if you've got a plan B or C, so that you can scale it up or down depending on the funds that you're able to raise. Building a profile for your project is, how are you actually going to engage people and tell that story? And that's not just if you're kind of pitching to major donors. I mean, the same is true of putting compelling applications together. You do really need to sell it, and make sure that the story that you're telling and what it is you're trying to achieve with your project is told consistently across your different platforms as well. So what goes into an application is then identifiable on your social media and on your website as well, that it all works and comes together, and there isn't a kind of different messages and a disconnect there. And then actually talking to your potential funders and supporters. Not everybody is open to calls or contacts, but we really value that and encourage that. And in most cases, you don't want to come out of the blue. You want to be building on conversations that you've already been having, whether that's with individuals or large organizations that can provide funding. And that might be, getting in a smaller application so that you build that relationship before you then move on and ask for more money. I'm going to hand over to Asha to pick up on the loan side of.
Thanks, Laura.
Yes.
So demystifying loans, I guess this can be a topic in its own right, really, and it's something that we could probably talk about at great length. So kind of a whistle-stop tour of loan finance and I guess what we call as debt finance. The first and I guess foremost question any project or any enterprise should be asking, is loan funding the right choice for us? And I can probably say 99% of the times projects don't even consider loan finance as being part of their funding package or something that can support develop their projects or get them to that, I guess, end stage. So there's I guess for myself, it's really just to talk about how loan finance can be used and at the different stages of your project life cycle. So Laura's kind of mentioned that, identify which, what stage you are at in your project, whether it's at the very early stage or whether it's at at the end stage, and loan finance can fit in at any one of those points. So it might be not something you consider from the onset, but it's something worth taking into consideration when you start planning your project or planning how you're going to be doing the fundraising. Kind of some examples of uses is organisations might need the upfront funds to actually acquire the building. So whether it's to purchase it or take out a leasehold on the building. If it's a relatively new organisation or an organisation that's not cash rich, they might need to secure the building in order to then go on to do the fundraising side of that. So loan finance can, come in at that very early stage. It can also be used to kind of cash flow, either whether it's the development stage or the capital stage. So if you have got a fully funded project, a grant funded project, or donors, some of the grant funders usually pay in arrears. So again, if your organisation doesn't have that upfront cash to pay some of the initial costs, that's where loan finance could come into place to help cash flow your project. And some funders or grant funders can consider some of the cost of finance within your grant application form. So again, that's something to take into account from the onset when you are looking to apply to grant funders. Do they fund finance costs? And if so, is it something that we can apply for? So the actual cost of the loan kind of evens out within the project. So it's just the capital of the loan that you'd be repaying back, and the costs of taking out the loan would be covered by your grant. And then again, if you have got a project that's fully funded, you don't need working capital, but you have a building at the end which is ready to kind of start operating from. But again, you don't have those initial costs in place to maybe hire staff or just have the initial cost in setting up the building for it to start operating. Again, loan finance can come into play at that time to help with those initial working capital costs for the project or the enterprise until the building is starting to generate that revenue to be able to kind of sustain itself going forward. So yeah, I mean, loan finance can be taken in small chunks, it can be taken in big chunks, it all depends on how it works for within your project and your life cycle. Again, because it is loan finance, it is with others similar, it is repayable finance. So it is something that you've got to consider, that how you would repay the loan if you were to consider it within your funding in the project. So again, it can be generated through the surpluses. So whether you're already generating surpluses or whether you're intending to generate surpluses, then if it shows that the surpluses you would be able to repay. Again, the grant funding, if you're being paid by arrears, the grant funding can be then used to pay off the loan as well as donations. You've got crowdfunding in there as well. So yeah, those are all the kind of different types of ways of generating income, and that you can be able to do that. I think we did mention community shares in there, and again, community shares is also classed as debt finance. So if you are an organisation raising community shares, the money that you've raised from the community shares would sit on your balance sheet as a debt or as a liability, because the owners of those shares can withdraw the capital that they've invested in your project at any time. So it is something that to take into consideration, that community shares and loan finance are kind of classed as one and all, in all honesty. But I guess if you are considering loan finance and it is something that you think could be of use to your project, then there's a lot of programs out there to help you kind of come to a stage of where you think you might be ready to apply for loan finance. And Laura, the next slide, please, sorry. We have, there are a number of programs available, to which the AHF kind of operate or a part of is Replan, and that is currently for just existing loan clients of the AHF and new clients of the AHF, as well as the National Lottery Heritage Fund grantees as well, because it is a Heritage Fund backed programme is this that the AHF is running. as part of one of our loan finance programs. But we are also an access point for the REACH fund. So again, we kind of, some of the capacity building can come part of our project viability grants and project development grants, which Laura works on, but it might be, your project might not fit into the current program. So we do have the REACH fund that can also help with financial planning, business planning, market research, even the governance. So if you are looking at governance issues, or you're looking to incorporate or looking to maybe set up as a community benefit society to raise those community shares, then that's something that the REACH fund can support you with. And it's a grant funded program. So you would have to have the intention of looking at loan finance or social investment in some form. And then we can refer you into the REACH fund program, where you can apply up to, I think it's an average of £15,000 to help you with that. So whether it's to pay for consultants or to backfill your post, if you need to spend some dedicated time on some of these issues, then that can be done as well. Because of the AHF and how we operate different to the wider social investment world, we can also include professional fees in that, in terms of doing surveying costs, valuation costs of your buildings and things like that as well. So that's something that we've kind of agreed with the REACH fund, that AHF clients can apply for those costs as well. Sorry, next slide, Laura, please. So yeah, so if you have got to a stage where, you know, loan funding is an option for you, you've got a business plan that shows that you have got a viable sustainable revenue model to demonstrate that you will be generating income in the future. Your financial information shows that you can repay the loan over whatever the term of the loan might be. And the key thing is that with heritage buildings, you have got an asset there, so it can act as security for any loans that you take out, which might get you better rates with providers. There are a number of different loan providers. So you've got at one spectrum, the commercial kind of high street lenders, which, you know, I would always advise you to go to first, because they will always be able to offer you better rates, but they might not always be able to offer you the 100% that you need to acquire the building or to do the project that you want to. And it's very much based on the value of the heritage asset. So if your asset's not worth the amount of money you need, you might not be able to get the full loan amount. And then you have a number of social investors, which the AHF is one of them. So there is a very good website called the Good Finance website, which lists all the social investors that operate in the UK, and it kind of helps you break it down in terms of locality, the amount that you want to raise, and whether you want to do it as a blended. So a lot of social investors have grant and loan finance available. Some just have loan finance available, and whether, again, you want to raise community shares, there's that option there as well. So it is always good to do the research, and I always say to applicants that, you know, make sure you find the funder or the loan provider that best works for you and your project and your life cycle. The AHF is unique in a sense that we do understand historic projects and the time scale that it can take, and the early kind of risk that you might need in terms of acquiring the buildings. It might not be worth very much to begin with, but you have got plans in place for it to have some sort of, you know, a value of asset at the end. And with the AHF, we can consider that end value of that asset when, you know, when considering loan finance, and we can do up to 100% of the purchase price of a property as well. So the AHF is very unique, and we understand the sector and the needs very well. But like I always say, you know, there are other funders out there and loan providers out there which, you know, which might fit better with where you are in your scheme. But our doors, I guess, are always open. We're always happy to talk that through with you as well. And to show some examples of the projects that we have funded, and examples of, I guess, the range of loan finance and at the different stages. So we've got at one scale where they've had to take out a loan to acquire the building, and this was before they'd even done, I guess, the development stage of the funding. They weren't eligible to apply for any grant funding until they actually had some sort of ownership over the building. So the AHF was able to fund that early stage purchase of that property, and yeah, the Old King's Head in Lincolnshire is now a fully opened operating project now, which is generating revenue that's been able to repay our loan. We've got another example where they needed working capital loan to help cash flow the development phase. So it was a fully funded grant funded project. It was a mixture of NLHF funding and some council funding, and some Scottish government grants as well. So, but again, the grants were paid in arrears, and they needed that upfront cash to be able to kind of do the initial works as and when the grants came in. And then you've got the last one, which is they've took out a loan to actually do the capital works as well. So it is an existing enterprise who's running activities through rented kind of offices and venues. They came across a former church which was disused, and the diocese were looking to exchange it into the hands of the community. So they took that opportunity to take on the building, and they needed to raise some funds to kind of do the initial renovations to get themselves into the building and start using the building. And this is one where it'll be a phased program. So once they've done the initial works, they can do their core business within the building, and then start opening it up to the community and start generating other sources of income for themselves. So yeah, it is a very whistle stop tour of kind of loan finance, but yeah, this is just a gist. And myself or Laura, we're always happy to kind of help to pick through some of those. And I guess to end with is just some useful resources that we thought we might be able to direct you on. So these are kind of the different funding programs, as well as sites where you can look at funding directories. So whether it is the Heritage Funding Directory or the Good Finance one for the loan finance, I guess this is a really good resource. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Laura.
No, I think we've counted through as much as we can in the time we've got. So Hannah, if we hand back to you, we can take any questions that people have.